Well, we're just going to go straight to questions this morning.
Yep.
I want to ask you about a few matters. Have you been following this inquiry?
We have, yes.
Yeah, okay, so you would know broadly the themes which has been focusing on. I guess I want to ask you about a few things today. Do you think that we have a problem with white-collar crime in Australia?
Senator, I pause only because I'm trying to think about how to answer that without expressing an opinion on that one. I think the fact that we have the AFP most recently announced a number of arrests when it came to money laundering, the fact that we need an agency like ASIC and the ACCC suggests that there are those who are going to take advantage of systems in a white-collar sense, that there is a need for regulators in this space, yes.
Okay. And over the last 5 years, do you think that there's been more corporate crime in Australia or less?
Well, I haven't monitored that to suggest whether there's more or less. I'll just ask my colleagues if there's any information we have that we can share on that.
Nothing additional, Senator. I think that issue probably sits with our market conduct division. So it's something we may need to look into, get back to you on that question.
We can take that on notice, Senator, if there's some statistics we can provide that might assist the committee.
So, sorry, I just want to check. Have we got the right people from Treasury here today?
Well, Senator, we weren't provided with any information to suggest what your lines of inquiry might have been. We considered...
We're doing an inquiry into ASIC.
Yeah, we considered the terms of reference yesterday. We were made aware of the committee on Friday. The terms of reference go to ASIC. This group has policy responsibility for ASIC, and so we're best placed to answer these questions. The reason Ms. Liu mentions market conduct division is that when we consider white-collar crime, that's not just ASIC, that includes all forms that we consider in the Treasury, but then would also involve responsibility from the Attorney General's Department from a criminal sense.
Yeah, I understand, and I understand the reference is also to conduct in the financial services sense. I understand that. Yeah, I understand that. So I guess I'm asking you broadly about trends that you are seeing as the Treasury Department in relation to corporate crime, and how, I guess and then my second question is, how effective do you think our regulators have been, our corporate and financial regulators have been in combating particularly corporate crime in Australia?
So when I consider the information that we've most recently, or some examples of information that have come to hand. So the FRA, when it considered ASIC, felt that they were doing a generally effective and capable role. Now, ASIC has a broad remit, and that's with regard to those issues that the FRA was considering at the time. I had the benefit of looking at some of the submissions to this inquiry overnight.
Yeah.
I saw, for example, the one from the Joint Consumer Reps suggested that ASIC was doing a reasonable job, but there were some places where they suggest around disadvantaged and vulnerable consumers and alike, where that extra work could be done. I also note, though, that there were some significant arrests by the AFP, guided by AUSTRAC, and I believe involving the ATO and ASIC last week when it came to money laundering syndicates. So the reason I hesitate is that whilst we're not a crime agency at the Treasury, clearly there are significant needs for criminal law enforcement against these white-collar or financial crime issues out there. So I don't want to say that there is no issue to be seen here. I don't have in front of me the statistics of it, but I would say, though, that some of the information to hand in front of us says that the regulators that we've got are dealing with that with the resources and the ambit that they've got.
Okay. So how do you think... Okay, so your view is that ASIC is doing a reasonable job when it comes to enforcing the corporate law, because the reason I'm asking you is because the Treasury is the department responsible for corporate law.
Mm-hmm.
So the enforcement of the corporate law must be of interest to you.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So the DPP has said that ASIC is, in the last financial year, 22-23, has made half as many referrals as it did just 5 years ago. So do you think that there's less corporate crime in Australia today?
Senator, like I said, I don't monitor corporate crime statistics, so I don't know if I can say that there's less of that. And nor can I talk for the CDPP. One thing that could lead to that in the referrals, though, is that as they work up investigations, ASIC, an investigation at any point in time is somewhere along the spectrum from initial investigation through to referral to the CDPP. Whether that is just a movement of those investigations into the CDPP space or there is something else going on there would be a question for ASIC in that sense.
Okay, well, we look forward to your answers on notice about whether you think the enforcement mechanisms are effective and whether you think that we're heading in the right direction on law enforcement here, because as far as I can see, over the last 5 years, every year, ASIC is making fewer and fewer referrals to the Commonwealth DPP. So the trend appears to be fewer referrals, but my sense of it is that there is no great reduction in corporate crime. I mean, in this year alone, we've seen major scandals like PwC emerge. So my sense is that there is still a lot of white-collar crime.
So one thing I'd suggest, and maybe we can look at what we can get on notice about to the sister committee, is that referrals to the CDPP for prosecution of serious criminal conduct is part of the equation. I think the other parts are the extent to which the DDOs, infringement notices and all the suite of regulatory tools that ASIC has available to it all go to this general and specific deterrence of conduct in the market that becomes important about setting those thresholds for what's happening in the marketplace. So, as I said, we can take that on notice. ASIC's probably best placed to provide a lot of that information, but we can by all means do that and refer that through as well.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking you is because you're not conflicted. I mean, your job is to advise the government on corporate law. ASIC obviously is, if I ask ASIC, it's like asking them to mark their own homework.
I understand.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And what about on insider trading? I mean, one of the major cases this committee looked at has been in relation to Nuix, where there were massive allegations and a lot of detail given about some individuals who formerly worked at Nuix and their involvement in a potential insider trading case, which was not taken to the DPP by ASIC. Do you think that insider trading laws in the Corporations Act are enforced appropriately in Australia?
So I think the laws that we've got there are appropriate for what we're the problem we're trying to solve with those at the moment. How they're enforced is how ASIC takes those matters forward. We're aware of the Nuix matter. We're monitoring to see how that progresses and what ASIC does next. But again, we're mindful that that's ASIC's independent responsibilities. If there's a concern with that, we're very keen to see, particularly the outcome of this inquiry, as to are there any changes that need to be made that suggest a broader concern that from a policy perspective we need to consider in this sense.
Okay, that's interesting. So you think that there is potential for some improvement here?
No, what I'd say, I think, Senator, is that we're interested to see the report of this committee, and the government will respond to that in due course as to what the problem might look like and what the extent of that problem is, and if there are any policy changes that need to take place. Because what we've got is that there's a policy framework that we administer, and then of course there is the how and the enforcement of that, which is the responsibilities of ASIC about how they take that forward.
Yeah, okay. I want to come to a couple of other issues before I hand over the call. So what sort of work are you doing on industry levies at the moment in Treasury?
I might ask either Tim or Nee to take that one, please.
Senator, I'm happy to talk to that question. So we covered this briefly at Senate estimates. So as I know you're aware, there was an ASIC funding model review released earlier this year. the implementation of those recommendations is in progress. So the recommendations directed to ASIC have been implemented. There are a number of recommendations that require legislation and consultation, and they're being currently worked through between ASIC and Treasury and government.
And do you think it's reasonable that individual financial planners should see their levies go from 1,200 to almost $3,500 in 1 year?
So, Senator, as you're aware, the previous government had in place a temporary levy release during the financial years 2021 and 21-22. That relief was always intended to be temporary. The costs that were imposed in that period were significantly less than what they would have otherwise been in that period. For example,
I understand that, but what's the answer? Do you think it's reasonable or not?
Well, the principle of the IFM is that the sectors that cause the need for regulation should cover the cost of that regulation, and that's the principle that's been applied here. During that period of levy relief, there was a $46 million shortfall in funding due to that relief, below what the costs of enforcing and regulating that sector was.
Okay, so Treasury recommended to stop the relief for this financial year?
That was contained in that. It was considered by the IFM review, and that was the recommendation of the...
That was the advice, yeah, okay.
Review, yes.
Okay, finally, we talked about these FRA issues last week, Mr. Baird, at estimates. So how much is the government going to save from cutting the reviews from 2 to 5 years?
Senator, I don't have the figures in front of me. I'll have to take that on notice in terms of the dollar saving.
Yeah, what's the current resourcing arrangements for the FRA?
So the panel ended their terms at the end of June after the delivery of the APRA review. There is a small amount of funding, and I don't have the dollar figure in front of me, allocated to Treasury to monitor the implementation of the two reviews and to maintain sort of capability within Treasury ahead of the future reviews recommencing and a new panel being appointed.
So what's it doing now? Anything?
So we have regular engagement with the regulators, so ASIC and APRA, the two that have been subject to prior reviews, and there'll be work done to monitor the progress of the implementation.
Sorry, my last question to you is what's the FRA doing now? Is it doing anything or nothing?
The FRA itself is not currently constituted, but there are people in Treasury that will monitor the progress of the implementation of the recommendations.
So, Senator, there's a small secretariat that's maintained within Treasury to monitor, as Tim's saying, or Mr. Baird's saying, to monitor the implementation of the FRA reports that will reconstitute the FRA as a body as it needs to for the next set of reviews.
Thanks for that remarks.